to say, this is silly and ridiculous for this young woman to be facing the criminal justice system, I will decide not to press charges against her. He actually used his discretion to attack her and to say that actually no, even though she's been cleared of wrongdoing by all the people, the police officer, the district, they would he still decided we're going to move forward with criminal charges.
The principal in that case, because this occurred at a school, the principal resigned before being fired, and the school board actually said the principal resigned before being fired. And then they fired the security guard in the case because they found that those two had been unfairly discriminating against black and brown students in the classroom after being pressured by some parents. So after DPS came to court and said, we are dropping everything, we've investigated this and we found that the student has done nothing wrong, the district attorney looked into that and said, no, we need to go ahead and find some other way to prosecute this child.
Right. And that decision was an instance of prosecutorial discretion. So another way that is super important that we encourage our DA, who is accountable to us, to use their prosecutorial discretion is in the case of law enforcement harming community members. So in the cases of Mike Brown, Samir Rice, Eric Gardner, all these people whose names we've heard for the last several years, and all the ones that we haven't spoken, every one of those cases was an instance where a district attorney, usually a district attorney, sometimes it's a city attorney, but many times it is a district attorney who decides, using their prosecutorial discretion, whether or not to charge a police officer or a sheriff with breaking the law, with a crime, which will carry a jail sentence, ensure a trial takes place, and 100% of the time in the 12 years that Mitch Morrissey has had an opportunity to charge a police officer or a law enforcement officer with a crime, a felony crime, especially ones like assault and battery or murder when they've harmed a community member, Mitch Morrissey decided not to. He has never seen a single instance of police brutality or death in the custody of law enforcement where he didn't say there's no criminal violation here and we're just going to go ahead and pass on even putting this question of whether or not this cop did something wrong up to a jury, which is so much a part of what we say is justice in our country. So prosecutorial discretion just incredibly important. You want to take 2 and 3?
So mandatory minimums. What this does is it takes power away from judges. If you're charged with a crime and found guilty and there's a mandatory minimum attached to the charge, it takes the power away from judges, it takes the power away from any other avenue of the criminal justice system. You're going to go to prison. You're going to go to jail, depending on the nature of the charge. So another thing, again, talking about how over 90% of cases are not going to trial. Plea bargaining. Plea bargaining is a huge contributing component to mass incarceration. If you have an excessive charge, or if you have a charge that's carrying an extensive prison sentence, a lot of people are not, whether or not you're innocent or not, a lot of people do not want to risk, and this is exactly what they're doing the rest of their life, in the hands of an oppressive criminal justice system. So what ends up happening is a lot of the times if there's a plea bargain put on the table for a misdemeanor crime or a crime that carries a jail sentence instead of a prison sentence, people will plea out because, again, like I just said, people do not feel comfortable gambling the rest of their lives or a good chunk of their life to a historically oppressive criminal justice system. Yes?
I wanted to add, and this is something I discovered from reading the voter guide that CCJRC put out. There are no guidelines for plea bargaining. And all of the candidates some of them absolutely oppose plea bargaining. The one that doesn't absolutely oppose it is still kind of wishy-washy. And most of them don't want the guidelines, if they're ever written, to be published. I mean, it's just wrong.
That's right, and it just leaves, because they want plea bargaining and all of the deals they try to make to be left up to their discretion and without any kind of holds or bars. So it's right, it's wrong. It's it.
I think what also should be up there with prosecutorial discretion, plea bargaining
That's right. Right, that's right, and that's totally, you're right, we probably should have the word up there, overcharging, because it is a kind of prosecutorial discretion that feeds into plea bargaining, because you're right, they just basically say, we're going to charge you with 9 felonies that carry a total of 1,000 years in jail if you were convicted, or you can take, you know, this one felony that has 20 years, and you clearly, you know, are being coerced at that point. Nathan has more to say.
One extreme example of overcharging is that the DA has full discretion over whether to bring death penalty.
That's right.
And so it's totally, whether somebody can get charged with death penalty or not is completely up to the DA in a particular district. And one of the reasons DAs like it is because they want to use it for plea bargaining.
Right. They can, again, just basically stack the deck against you so much that you're afraid not to take the plea, because if you went to a jury trial against the, you know, 20 charges that included the death penalty as one of the consequences, you would be, one, likely to lose and get convicted of some of them, and juries often give harsher sentences than what's offered in the plea bargains. So that's how they often get people in our community to plead guilty to crimes they literally didn't commit. They know that they're innocent. They know that they didn't do these things. But because they were so afraid that the corrupt prosecutor who is overcharging them using their prosecutorial discretion, they will take the bargain that's offered to them because they're so afraid of the judge or the jury bringing a hammer down on them, and they say, you know what, I'm going to sit in jail for 2 years so that I don't have to possibly sit in jail for 40. And this is a really important way in which our justice system is broken. But you're totally right. It's actually number 5 up there. That one of the most important kinds of decision-making power we give a DA as the community is the power of whether or not to seek the death penalty. The power of whether or not to decide we should take someone's life because of a crime they committed. And that is an awesome, in terms of the just amazing kind of power that we put in this one person's hand who's usually elected completely uncontested. You have more to say or something good?
You said a lot of what I wanted to say. I've spoken to so many people who have records now because they were afraid of a jury that doesn't look like them, or because they were pushed to be afraid of a jury that doesn't look like them, and they pled guilty to a crime that they didn't commit. So the downside to that is they now have a record. So if they ever do commit a crime, then they committed a second crime. It happens so often because we have public defenders who are so busy, who have so many cases, that they don't have time to prepare for court. So they're just hoping that you plead guilty whether you did it or not. At that point, it's not even about your guilt. It's about clearing it off and getting it out of their way. And now you have a fee you have to pay every month that's usually tied to this guilty plea. And then what if you can't pay that fee? Now you have someone coming to look for you because you are unable to pay the fee for this trumped up guilty charge, and now you're back in jail, and this is your second offense. And that's essentially how someone gets caught up in this very corrupt system that we have.
Right, so a good example, just something to note too, if you're experiencing homelessness, for example, and you get cited for trespassing, you're going to be cited, but then say you're in an impaired state of mind, you're having some sort of difficulty at the moment, you're not able to comprehend that now you need to show up for court, you need to be here at this particular time. So that turns into a failure to appear, and then that becomes a bench warrant. So people like Michael Marshall, people like Marvin Booker, other folks experiencing homelessness, this is a lot of the time how they end up in jail, unable to afford very low-level bonds. And again, a lot of that has to do with prosecutorial discretion, and like we were saying, just the way that the DAs have chosen to handle these public health issues. And yes.
I've been in court a couple of times with refugees also, and they ask, do you want a translator in English? Hello.
Right.
And then there's no one to explain their rights. There's no one to explain. They come from countries where being arrested is death sentence. And they come from Somalia and Burma and various places like that. And so there's no one to say, these are your rights. Do not plea out. They plea for exactly the same reasons you're talking about, but even more psychological trauma because they come from countries where the police mean death.
anybody can do one means death. And maybe it's not so far-fetched actually, but still, they have even larger kind of things. So for people who are refugees and entitled to be here legally, and they get pulled over for something or caught up in something, and then their whole family and they're afraid of being sent back. It's very, very, it's very, very traumatizing for them and their families, and they also don't understand the court appearances. The paperwork is all in English. It speaks them out. They can't read in any language. They need an interpreter.
And even for people who are from this country, I mean, the criminal justice system is not something that we're taught on how to navigate.
Right.
So, I mean, a lot of the time people are navigating this through trial and error, and they're literally gambling with their lives as they are navigating the system.
Right, and these things, I'm not positive that these are things that the DA themselves can fix, but they can use the bully pulpit, right?